What's up, crew? Welcome to Filming in Progress, the show that takes you backstage into the world of local businesses and the people who make them shine. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with David Crosby, the entrepreneurial force behind Rosso coffee roasters. From opening his first cafe in Ramsey to expanding across the city, David's commitment to quality and community has made Rosso a beloved name in Calgary's coffee scene. Where are we?
We're in Calgary. We're in headquarters of Rosso Coffee Roasters. Behind us, you can see our roasting facility, and I don't know how much the camera can kind of get, but all the different coffee beans we have. So, yeah, home sweet home.
Right on. What first drove you to get into the coffee industry?
Got to go back into the memory banks. It's a long time ago. So 2007, I finished university. I was going to school in Nova Scotia, came back to Calgary, and wanted to get a job, and I hate saying this now, trading stocks, and couldn't find a job. I had my business degree, but no one would give me, the first leg into the industry. So I was like, okay, what do I know? What do I know and love? And during university, it was like coffee. I would study in coffee shops every day. I'd worked in some different nationals, so I'd worked in 3 national coffee companies. I had also worked in some local in Calgary. And this is, 05, 06. So this is when people are this is pre-YouTube, pre-Instagram, pre-social media. Coffee at the time was very different than what we think of today. But I was like, yeah, I love coffee. Came back to the city. I put a little business plan together, PowerPoint presentation, and then was kind of leaning on my business degree, thinking, what do I want to do with that? And our first location, there was a bakery going to go into it, and the bakery backed out. And I approached the landlord and said, I got this crazy idea, I want to open a cafe. And they're like, yeah, sure. And the problem is I don't have any money. So what can we do? And the landlord said, yeah, no problem. We'll build out the space. We'll put the cost of that into the monthly rent. And I was 24 years old. And that sounded, opportunity of a lifetime. So I signed the dotted line. And all was in the store was flooring and a bit of plumbing. And 10 weeks later, opened the doors. Didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I thought I really knew coffee. I didn't hire anyone at the start. The location is very hidden.
Ramsey, right?
Yeah, Ramsey. Yeah. And so opened the doors. First day, we had 12 orders. I handled them all. I got there at 4 a.m, did all the baking, made all the coffee. That was kind of the start. And then I quickly realized I had lots of free time in between serving customers. I'd research coffee, what was going on in the industry. And that's when I realized I knew a bit about coffee, but not to the extent where specialty coffee is and or was and is now. And through that research, I started to realize I gotta change a few things. So it was I gotta buy a different espresso machine. I needed different grinders, and then really started leaning on customer service. I think at the very start, that's what I kind of knew. That was my bread and butter. Is second you came in that door, I knew that you loved a small latte. I knew you had a dog, or the family members who would come in, and people that would come in that store at the very start. It was their hidden gem, and that was kind of that was the very beginning. Now 17 years later, it's grown into something, and we've done lots of things that we never expected back then. It's just an honor. Love being in the industry, and just an honor to be where we are now.
Unreal. So you went to school in Nova Scotia, and then you came back. Did you always know that you were going to come back and start a business in Calgary, or was it ever an option to start one out there?
No, it was. The lifestyle and the East Coast is amazing, but my roots, my family's here. And the city of Calgary, there's something amazing. It's a very an entrepreneurial city. And there's just a draw bringing me back. And I knew the challenges of running a business is already hard, and there's like some factors out there that's like going to make it tougher. So yeah, always wanted to come back. Yeah, love the city of Calgary. Wish we could change the winter weather a bit, but yeah, always knew I wanted to come back.
Yeah, awesome. Did you have like entrepreneurial tendencies growing up and that sort of thing? Like, did you always know that you were going to start a business after business school, or?
Yeah, so I did a few businesses growing up. One was like buying and selling like cards. Got into like baseball and hockey cards, so did that. Then in university, I started Jack Frost snow removal.
Nice.
And handed out flyers. I would go to like that, high-end neighborhoods and hand out flyers. So it was always kind of like in my blood, and just knew like I would want to be an entrepreneur. I like the idea of like creating a vision, and just the tactical stuff that goes on. And definitely once I started Rosso, it was like very quickly I realized it wasn't a very good location. I quickly realized like I needed to learn, and I didn't have a marketing budget. I started the company with like $0. The first deposit I ever put in the bank was $240, and we built everything off like cash flow. So it was very hard. And I always said to myself what can I control? I can't control how many customers come in. I can't control how people perceive the coffee. What I can control is how hard I work. And so my idea was like, if it isn't working well, I just need to work harder and longer. And in the short term, that is like most people don't put in enough time for things to succeed. I maybe spent too much time in that zone of like really pressing. Like my first day off was 3 years after opening. Like I didn't close on Christmas Day. I didn't close on New Year's Day. It was just every day, like 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. Yeah, that's where it began.
Yeah. Do you think that the current culture of instant gratification kind of kills maybe potential entrepreneurs' capabilities or possibilities?
Yeah, yes and no. I think it's just translated differently. Like there is something nice about through social media, you can put something out into the ethos and you can get feedback right away. That's important. If I could go back and tell myself like a piece of advice, it'd be like think more long term, and don't beat yourself up so much about if things aren't working as quickly as you thought they would, because things take time. You kind of marinate on the power of like compounding something or like improving things like 1% at a time. Instead of at the very start, I was like, oh, if I do this, 100 more customers will come in. It's not the case. I'm going to improve this thing, and maybe I'll gain one more customer every single day. Or that experience when someone comes in the door, I got to provide like an excellent experience and go above and beyond, make sure the drinks and food's tasting delicious. Mm-hmm. And that's where, that person might come not once a week, but twice a week, or they're going to bring their friends. And that's the mindset. Like after the first year, I started to kind of like see that and transform kind of the idea of like, now we would call it like hustle culture or whatever, just like always my answer at the start was like work harder, work longer and work harder. Now, 17 years later, it's like, don't need to think that way as much. It's like just work smarter. And when I'm going to put my time and energy into something, it's like go 110% and see it kind of start to finish.
Right. So coming out of school, you mentioned customer service several times in there, and I think that's a crucial ingredient for longevity. Yeah. You mentioned that was always the plan as well. Why did you know that was so important?
Just hospitality, especially the coffee industry. It's like, fortunately or unfortunately, it's kind of a commodity business, and the experience can be very similar to, at the time there wasn't that many cafes in the city, but I knew that's a way I could stand out. It's like the second that door opens, hey Aiden, haven't seen you in a few days, hope things are great, and making that connection, even if it's for 2-3 minutes. And we try to move that ethos through like the whole company is understanding hospitality. When someone comes over to your house, you're going to treat them a lot different than like a transaction at a general restaurant. So, it just felt like right from the get-go, and
How do you instill that value into, obviously you've got several cafes now, and a lot of staff that deal with those customers, and it's no longer you being able to control that moment every time.
Yeah.
How do you go about training your staff or instilling that value in everybody that works for you?
Yeah, funny. We just had a big long meeting on like helping improve this. I think it's setting standards. Everyone has a different standard of what like hospitality would mean, or even like cleaning the washroom. And it's really about like showing people and guiding them through. So for us, like our baristas go through quite a bit of training, and they go through training on the coffee side, and then they get a customer service training side. And that side is, hospitality for us isn't just like greeting you the second you come in. It's little things like handing the drink out to you and making that eye contact, getting to know the customers as much as possible, or feeling free to like, Ramsey's, sometimes it's not so busy, and our store manager might sit down with you and just, shoot the shit for a couple of minutes, and team members knowing that that's okay. It's like little things like that, all the way up to someone orders coffee online and something goes terribly wrong, we fix it immediately. Like that's kind of driven throughout. We have one of our core values is like also continuous improvement, and layering that on top of like hospitality, customer service is really important. So the team kind of, it's constantly like trying to improve on that. And I think for 2025, we're trying to look outside the box of how to create it like a different experience in our cafes. So we've got our leadership team kind of working on that experience, and what is like the new vision of like cafe service, because a lot of the time ours isn't much different than so many other places, and how do we kind of re-envision that? So that's kind of where we're going in the next phase of Rosso.
How do you design that experience from the ground up, and is it different like store to store?
We try to have the cafe reflect the community. So that's kind of like a starting base for the cafe. So like Inglewood has kind of got this old brick. There's like, lots of wood, some splashy colors on the back, and it's supposed to be like a reflection. And then the team members, they got to be, passionate about coffee, passionate about customer service, passionate about hospitality, and it's like up to the management in the team or in the store to like drive home that experience. So it's slightly different in every cafe, which is like good and bad. But we're always trying to like improve on it, change it, and if you have any recommendations.
I love all your cafes. Is the customer always right?
That's a hard one. Whenever I hear that, part of me agrees 100%. And then sometimes I think of, I don't know if you've heard the quote from Steve Jobs. It's like, sometimes the customer doesn't know what they want. And he said that with the iPhone. And, there was a transition where we were going from like, we used a brand at the very start called Illy, and we were transitioning we went to a company called George Howell, who's kind of like an OG coffee roaster out of Boston, and we made that transition. We lost some customers because the coffee went from kind of dark, and we went to like lighter and brighter and like fruitier coffees, and some people just don't like those coffees. And I think as we've gone through the transition of that over the years, we can have both now represented. So I think it's a mix. We try to, how can we support the customer? And if a customer has a complaint or a suggestion, take it as at face value, and how can we improve? Not look at it as like a threat. And I think a lot of companies, when a customer, we got a We got one today about one of our cafes being too warm right now. And that's like an issue. It's like 35 degrees in Calgary, very unusual. So how do we fix that and address that? What can we do in that cafe? And I'm kind of rambling on, but I'm gonna sit on the fence, and it's like, it's a bit of both. They're sometimes right, and then sometimes you gotta tell them, like, this is what we're doing and we're sticking to our guns. And that's okay too. I think a lot of companies are always like reacting, especially when you're brand new, you're reacting to what a customer says. And if we always reacted to what a customer said at the start, I don't know if we would be in business, because some of those decisions just wouldn't be feasible to run as a business.
Yeah. I love that answer. I'm of the same opinion. I think it's so important to listen to all feedback, but you don't want to be everything to everybody, right? Otherwise, you have no niche or whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
So, backtracking a little bit, I've never heard this story where your landlord basically paid for you to start the business. More, obviously, I'm sure there's more complexities there, but did you know this landlord, or how did that all come about?
Yeah, so we've done that a few times. So in retail, it can be like a strategy. You go to the landlord. The reason the landlord likes it is because the rents look very high for what it is, because you're baking in that premium there. And then they can go to their lender and say, hey, we're getting $90 a square foot. We want to refinance the building, and we're getting these outrageous rates. You can give us more money. So that's why it's advantageous for them. Why we did it, one, I just saw it as an opportunity. So I did this PowerPoint presentation, and they didn't have anyone going into the space. This bakery had backed out, and so I just said, like, they kind of came to me with that plan, and I said, sure, yeah, why not? Now, after about a year, I realized, like, I was paying a lot of rent, and I would have done things a little bit different if I'd known, but it was like, no, the opportunity's there, so you got to. So I think for people getting into whatever industry or like into entrepreneurship, it's like at the very start, you almost have to say yes to everything. Not enough, like, people are sometimes looking for like the perfect opportunity. And it's like, we used to say, yes, we do every event, anything to get our brand out there, anything so people would interact with like the coffee or taste the coffee at the start. And then as you grow, then you can start picking and saying, like, it's just as important to say no to things. Saying like, hey, this isn't, we're not doing this event, or, we don't do catering anymore, or whatever, because your business can start to all of a sudden go this way, instead of like, we're trying to create depth in our business. So as in, like, revenue coming all the way through, and in one particular niche. So like roasted coffee in Calgary all the way down, instead of like, we're trying to focus on everyone in Canada. And yeah.
It seems like it's quite simple, or it's easy to fall into the trap of this fly is bothering me. It's easy to fall into the trap of we'll be yes to everybody and that sort of thing. How do you decide what to niche down on specifically? Or how have you done that in the past?
COVID, like, 2020 happened, and that's when we had 7 cafes. We had the roastery, so we had we had 9 spaces. We had 7 cafes. We had a warehouse, roastery, and office team, and then we also had a bakery. And we were doing everything from scratch, like all the sandwiches, all the bread, all the pastries there. And COVID hit, and we decided shut down 2 stores, and deploy capital into the most important parts of the business. So it's like online sales went crazy, wholesale went to almost 0, and our retail sales, were down 90% at the very start. So that helped frame everything. Like, we got to stop doing all this stuff that we just caught ourselves doing, and we're like, oh, it's generating revenue. Like, go do it. Catering, there's lots of money in that. Go do it. There's lots of money in like pop-up events. Go do that. We were doing like 20 different things, and nothing was excellent. And then COVID came and it was like, okay, none of that is our core business. We're going to do cafes. We're going to roast the best coffee in the world. And we're going to focus on our online business. And that's all since then, that's all we've done. And we say no to way more things. And people come with like great opportunities all the time. And I think it's, as we used to say yes, it's just as powerful to say like, no, that's not for us. Here's this company that does that. And we find partners like now for pop-ups, we have a partner that does all those. For catering, we have a partner who does all those and kind of dish that off. And it's like transform the business, because now it's like we got 4 things, we focus on that and nothing else. And you don't get distracted into something that leads to you you do the P&L at the end of the year and you're like, oh, catering brought in 1% of the business, but it's 40% of our headaches. What are we doing here? Like, just axe that.
Yeah. It's interesting because you said earlier that, at the early stages, you have to say yes so much. And then I think there's a transition in every business where you decide, actually, it's a no now. Yeah. And that change, like you said, that transforms the business. Is there a point that you think maybe is universal, or is it different for every business when that transition happens?
Yeah, I like analogies, so I can use analogy. At our first cafe, so hired, it's me working by myself. We started to get busy enough that I was like forced to hire. I needed to hire someone because the cafe was getting busy. And then we had I don't know if you remember, like Fast Forward, the magazine. It was like a weekly magazine came out. We got a review and that was like our big hit. And that was like the turning point where I was like, I can't do everything. And because all of a sudden it's like a light switch went off and we went from like 30 customers a day to 70 because of that review. So I think it's when systems start to break is when you have to transition from saying like either yes to everything, or that's when you have to make the transition into being like, I'm just gonna work harder. It's like, no, you gotta set up a system, and that system will support yourself and every team member to do. So like the way we make coffee is a system. The way we interact with customers, there's a system around that. Now you can be creative in that, but there's a system to do that. How we fulfill an order, there's a system. And that way, it isn't also relying on you as the entrepreneur to go and do those things. It's like you can show someone, you got a description of how to do that thing, you can show it to someone else, and then that's your role now, and I just go fulfill these roles over here. So there isn't it's not a certain revenue number. I think it's like when things start to break down, and what are you focusing on as an entrepreneur? What's like the biggest part of the business you want to focus on, and where you have enough revenue to support someone else focusing on different parts of the business. And then ideally you're like laddering up or getting that, flywheel momentum up to now you have 5 people helping you and you're just focusing on the 2% that drives 80% of the revenue.
Right. When you made that decision, like everybody makes that first decision to hire somebody, and you said it was because you're too busy, which is awesome. Was it hard for you to delegate at those early stages because you'd been the one from the beginning?
Yeah. I hadn't really managed people before. So, my thought process at the very start is, again, I didn't take a day off for 3 years. So it was like, if I leave, the customer service isn't going to be as good. That's how I used to think, like at the very beginning. And then one day, it was like a light bulb went out. It's like, I just need to train other people to give the same customer service I'm going to give, then I can leave. And it was like this, like weight lifted off my shoulders. And so I think, once you can kind of start like handing those things off, it's super important. And the sooner you do that and giving the person like time and attention, training them to 110%, not just 100, that they'll surpass you. And like also getting rid of your weaknesses. Like if a min is not what you're good at, find a partner or someone else who can do the admin, so you can focus on business development or the accounting or whatever that's what you're passionate about and that's what you're good at.
Do you feel like when you made those first couple hires that you were giving up things that you were passionate about, or did you know that you were moving in the right direction for yourself and slash or the business?
Yeah, I knew I was moving in the right direction. It was more is more could I support them to like achieve the best of their ability to turn them into like coffee professionals, not just like, oh, I'm working at a coffee shop, that they could see this as like a career. It took a bit of time for me to like let go, but then once I understood letting go is actually going to help me and help them more, that was kind of like the turning point where, you don't need to do everything. As an entrepreneur, you think you do, or there's people who are very good at delegating, but they delegate and don't follow up, or don't support the person by like excellent training. They're just like, hey, you do this task, and then get frustrated when it's maybe not up to their expectation, or they're not cleaning the washroom quite like they did. And it's like, well, have you shown them how? No. Well, maybe the standards are different, and you just got to show them what the standard is, and most people will come to that standard or exceed it.
Yeah. Do you think that's true? Do you think it's most people, or do you think it's hard? Is it hard? I suppose, is it hard or easy to get the right people on the bus? Or attract the right talent, or, go about that process?
Yeah, I think it's a blend. We were just working on some like non-negotiables. We're creating a list of like these non-negotiables, and it's like some of these things have to be like this, we're drawing the line in the stand, and it's like you either do these things, or if you don't want to do these things, that's okay, but it's not going to work here. And you got to go find somewhere else. And that's okay too. Like that's just as important. And I think empowering people in the company that if you're not a cultural fit, that's okay. Like no hard feelings, go succeed. I want you to go succeed somewhere else. Like that's awesome. I think it's a long game trying to create that culture, and at the very start, attracting great people. I went into my network, and I found all my friends working at the cafe, and like I wouldn't recommend that because you're not going to hold them to the same standard, because you're going to go have beers or go hang out on the weekend or whatever. But I think you got to hold others accountable and hold yourself at the highest of levels, and people will start to see excellence around them. And I think like 99% of people want to do an amazing job at work. Half the time, they just don't know how to do that. And it's giving that framework to the person, like, this is our standard of cleaning the washroom. You either achieve it or you don't. And it might sound like, oh, everyone knows how to clean the washroom. Yes, everyone does, but it's different levels of cleanliness. And I might not meet your level. And the washroom's, a silly example, but that could be it for anything. Making espresso to greeting a customer as they come in, or handing out that drink. It's really important that you set the standard, what that is, and then helping people get there. And if they can't get there, and you're providing a lot of support, then maybe it's showing like, okay, this isn't a cultural fit. Might be time to kind of move on.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important that, the cultural fit it really shows whether people actually want to be there or not, or whether it's a fit or not. Some people are desperate for a job, but most people are just wanting to do a good job, like as you mentioned, and it's very clear, and it's okay if they're not a fit. Yeah. You mentioned in there working with friends, and you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're business partners with your brother.
Yes.
How has that changed your like personal dynamic?
So my brother is my business partner, and so is my girlfriend. So the three of us own the business. So Cole's my brother, we didn't grow up together. So I started the cafe in 2007. He joined in 2009 or 10. And I really didn't know him before he joined. And so it's been, honestly, it's been amazing because we're half brothers. So we grew up in different households as we were young. Joins the company and we get to know each other. And he just like got bitten by the coffee bug. And now at the very start of the business, he was drinking like large mochas and, like syrups and, fancy Starbucks drinks. And now, he's competed in the World Barista Championship. He's come like third in the world. He's won a bunch of awards around the world for coffee competitions. And So it's brought us very close. We travel, like last year, we traveled, well, in the last 12 months, we've traveled together for the last 7. So we spend a lot of time together. It's not going to work for most families, I think, because there's like, I didn't grow up with him, so we don't have that kind of baggage per se. And I always think back, like, it's amazing that coffee's brought us so close together. I think, I work with Jesse, who we've been together like 15 years. And, that dynamic, we keep it, not what happens at work stays at work, but it's like, it's important to know that things don't like come from the home, come to work, and vice versa. So we might not agree on a decision that happened at work, that's okay. And we don't take that home with us. Now, we definitely talk at home about work. It's not like we, leave leave work and then, work doesn't travel home. It's a fine balance, and it can be all consuming. Entrepreneurship is all consuming. If you want to succeed at, I think, entrepreneurship, people won't like this, but it's like there is no balance. You have to go all in. And like any high level professional, it's like you got to dedicate, 90 to 110% of your time, energy, effort to this business if you want it to succeed, because it is so hard. I kind of answered the family question, and not really.
No, absolutely. Yeah, those boundaries. I'm always curious. It's really hard to navigate, and I always find that, or I always hear that people either love working with their partners and family and that sort of thing, or they hate it. And so it's definitely different per person. But what kind of like tangible boundaries? You said, not discussing work-related issues at home and vice versa.
So we do. We definitely do. I think the boundaries for us, it's like the three of us are really good at different things. So that helps. We used to all kind of 5 years ago and plus, we used to all we'd get in a room, big decisions coming through, and all three of us would sit on every big decision, almost every decision. And that was like fatigue, because you and me might agree and Cole didn't, or what. And so we just decided, like, okay, you're going to own one part of the business, you're going to go own the other part of business, and I'm going to own this part of the business. And since we've separated like that, we still get together on the very big decisions, but when Jesse makes a decision, we just go, okay, that's it, awesome, we're just going with that. She may lean on us like, hey, I'm thinking about, she handles like a lot of the operations in the cafe and the team, and it's like, oh, I want to renovate one of the stores. Okay, well, I'll sit in on that meeting, but Cole's on green coffee buying. So he's on the road a lot. The coffee he wants to buy, he's gonna, we're not gonna all taste the coffee and be like, oh, we don't like this one, you like that one. It's like whatever decisions he makes, we're good with. And I handled I'm more on the finance side. So, if we need a big loan to like open a new cafe, then it's on me to present to them what's going on. So I think shifting duties and finding, if you're going to have a partnership, especially with a family member, you don't want to be experts at the same thing. You want someone who's going to help balance you out as much as possible, and then kind of divide and conquer. And really that way it's like a recipe to support each other, while at the same time like actioning on different things. Because it's really, it's really fun, like in our industry, going and buying, traveling the world, going and buying coffee is like fun and looks sexy. So we could all want to do that. But the problem with that is the rest of the business isn't getting taken care of. So we gotta split these duties up and support each aspect of the business.
Yeah. I love that. It's about trust in each other to make the right decision, but it's also going back a little bit kind of towards like the systematization that we were talking about earlier, right? Like if you want to avoid problems, then systematize it, and that's what you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think if, as a consumer, I can go buy a coffee for $1 and I can buy a coffee for $10?
Yeah.
So what percentage or how important is it, to educate the customer on what you're selling?
Yeah, it's a big part of the business. I think, we used to talk kind of down to the customer and thought that was like education. So it's like, oh, this coffee's from Costa Rica, like, it's gone through this processing. Like, how do you not know what processing is? Where I think the industry's changed and we've taken this approach kind of the whole way through. It's like, where can we meet you? Where can we meet you in your like coffee journey? So for some people, their coffee journey is like, I just want a cup of coffee, tastes good, give it to me quickly, and I'm out the door. And that's totally cool. We don't need to, tell this romantic story about, oh, this coffee's from Panama and it's from this famous farm. They don't want to know those things. But there's a segment of customers that do want to know that. And how can we talk to them while still talking to the average Joe, give me my coffee, I'm out the door. And there's a balance on those things, but I think as time has gone on, we've provided education that's like easy for the consumer to kind of like meet them where they are. So we have lots of videos like on YouTube on like how to brew coffee at home, or how to brew coffee if you got entry level like equipment like a French press, like what can you do to elevate it? So you get a scale, don't use tap water, use filtered water, buy freshly roasted coffee. It doesn't even have to be from us, from any roasting company that's in whatever city you're living in. So little steps like that. And then if you fall down the rabbit hole, then there's lots to find there. Then you can go into like, there's a million videos on YouTube about like coffee grinders and which one's best for what. So taking people on that journey is like, we're trying to meet the customer where they are, and everyone's kind of in a different part of that journey, and it's okay wherever you are.
Yeah, I love that. You talked about green sourcing and that sort of thing. Why do you could go buy from anybody, you could not roast. Why is roasting important, and why is sourcing your own green and traveling to these areas important?
Well, you've been to Rwanda with us. So traveling's important. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. You need to get big enough that traveling makes financial sense. So we had a smaller roaster. We were roasting coffee on that in our Ramsey store. And then we finally got big enough. We're like, okay, we made the decision. We used to buy from like importers. So they would have like a green list and they would send it to you and say like, here's our 10 coffees. And you could only buy off that. It was okay for a bit, but the problem started happening is like, well, what if we want more of like this one type of coffee? We're not getting access to that. So it became an issue about access, but also us having understanding about like what is going on at the very beginning of coffee. And being in North America, we are so far removed from that. There's a few Hawaii has gross coffee, and there's a little bit in California, or we need to go to like the closest place is Mexico. And so part of the dream was like, let's go see this in person. It'll give us better understanding of like when we're roasting, when we're brewing coffee, and it'll be like, we'll create some partners through that. So our first trip was in 2015. We went to Costa Rica and Guatemala, and it was so eye-opening because you're on the ground, you're picking a coffee chair, you're eating it for the first time. And we've been, making coffee for the last 7 years up until that point. And it's kind of this like, eureka moment of like, wow, how hard it is to grow coffee. It is incredibly hard. It is very labor intensive, and you don't see that. We'd watch all the YouTube videos and stuff, and we just didn't quite understand how much work goes in. So part of it was seeing that, and then part of it is like when you go to a country to taste coffee, the list isn't 10 coffees. The list is, well, there is no list. There's 150 coffees that you could try. So we're in Guatemala, we're trying 100 different cups of coffee every day. And you do a thing called a cupping. And it's a bunch of different coffees and you're tasting them. And then you're saying like, oh, I like cup 4, 7, 25, and 60. And then they might be from different farms. And then it's like, okay, let's go see the producer. So we drive out, see the producer, meet them, tour the farm. We get an idea of like what kind of quality they're doing on the farm. Is this a type of coffee that it's got to ship from Guatemala and come to Calgary? That takes 3 months. It might be on our shelf here if we buy enough of it. It might be here for 2 months. We've got to have all those things that kind of thought process, like, oh, how long is the quality going to last for the next 8 months? And as time goes on, green coffee starts to fade. So it starts to lose its like flavor. So all those things kind of come into play, and then you make those relationships. So like some of the coffee producers we've been buying from in like Costa Rica, Guatemala, it's like been, almost a decade now of buying the same coffee year after year. And some years the coffee tastes better, and some years it doesn't taste as good. But we make the commitment of like, we're gonna come see you. We haven't as much traveled to coffee farms since COVID, but it's like, it was a commitment up to 2019, see them every year and buy and support them regardless almost of the quality of the coffee. It's an important part of like our ethos at Rosso, and we've been buying, it's kind of called direct trade. Not all of it's direct now, but going and like seeing the producers and shaking their hands, tasting coffee on their farm, and trying to like bring, not telling them how to farm, but like, here's what we're seeing customers want, naturally processed coffees that are super fruity are selling really well, or really nice washed coffees are doing very well. That gives you guys an idea. We're not telling them, how to farm, but it's like a feedback loop to them, because they're always curious, like, what does the customer want? And we're part one of the customer, but the end consumer is like part two.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you're giving them just as much value, right? I think that's incredible. And also the fact that you're building a relationship with these people, which is what business is all about. So I imagine, if you lock in a deal and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy your coffee regardless for X amount of time, they're going to put their heart and soul into that.
Yeah, and they appreciate that, because it's a crop and it's affected by, the seasons that are going on. You can have droughts, you can have too much rain, and coffee is like resilient, but it's like pretty delicate, and very high-end coffee, like geishas that are very expensive, like they can die or not handle certain weather changes very well. So yeah, the support we can provide them with like consistency in purchasing is really important.
Awesome. You also do coaching.
Yeah.
How'd you fall into that, and why do you do it?
I sometimes ask myself that every day. So there's a weird thing called coffee competitions, and there's one that's like kind of the standout that most baristas would know. It's called the World Barista Championship. So there's about 60 countries in the world that compete in it, and if you win your nationals, you'll go and represent your country at Worlds. And it's a presentation. It's kind of like figure skating might be a good analogy, or F1, whatever one you like more. But it's like the barista has 15 minutes to do a presentation, and they have to serve 4 judges a milk-based beverage, espresso, and a signature drink that has no alcohol. So the signature drink is their kind of like twist on like a cocktail, but can have alcohol. And then there's some technical judges that watch how they make the coffee, and there's a score sheet, and then the sensory judges on how the coffee tastes. And the barista will do a big presentation describing what the coffee is going to taste like, how it was grown, why the grower might make the decisions, why they're making the decisions to get these flavors in the cup. And we started competing. So Cole's usually the barista competitor, and I'm the coach. And it's weird to say that there's like coaches in this thing, but it's in our industry, it's a big deal. So we started that in 2010. Cole competed, and they go on once a year. And Cole, it took us 8 years to win. So we'd get one shot once a year to go back. And every year we just like slowly, he came second place in 2013, disqualified, I think, in 2014. We came third place in 2017. Anyways, 2018, he finally wins. We go to the Worlds, and competing against like 55 other countries. He comes 5th place in the world, which is a big deal. And Canada has a long history of doing very well. And Calgary has produced, out of the last 10 years, we have, I believe, 10 years of Calgarians winning the Canadian championship. So it's like a big deal in our city. And so we've gone to Worlds, and then in 2022, we had a gentleman reach out to us who wanted some coaching. His name's Boram, and he's from Brazil. So he came here, did some coaching. He came 7th in the world. Then he came back the next year, and he ended up winning, which was a big deal. And then we traveled with him for 3 months, kind of September to December last year. So we did 100 days on the road doing like pop-up events, seminars, and you become kind of the face of the industry. And that's why so many people compete in it. And then there's like some other competitions, like Brewers Cup, where it's about brewing coffee instead of making espresso. There's one on like tasting coffee, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a weird niche thing that for whatever reason, like Cole and I are competitive. We grew up playing sports, so we're like competitive guys. And it's kind of like F1 because it's like weird innovations will come out of that will go into the cafe. So might be like a certain roasting style or a certain type of coffee did very well in the championship. And then you'll start to see that farm and that coffee make its way into the cafes, or like a brewing technique. So this was a long time ago, but in like 2013 or 14, a certain gentleman used a certain kind of grinder, and it changed and opened everyone's mind to using that grinder. And now they're literally in every cafe. And up until then, no one used that grinder. So yeah, it's kind of innovation, forward thinking, while being like the winner represents specialty coffee.
Yeah, it's like marketing. It's like marketing and market research at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that? So as you were touring, how did that have what kind of direct impacts did that have on your business?
A lot, and it had a lot on Rosso. So I think we've had, we've shipped coffee to like 25 different countries because of that. So in those, we were away, 100 days. We went to 14 different countries during that time, and we brought coffee from Rosso with us the whole way through. So we got lots of people. We think like North America loves coffee. We like drinking coffee. The appreciation for like very high-end coffee though goes on, I would say, in Asia, like Hong Kong, Thailand. There's like, they appreciate like the art and science of coffee, where we just like love the drink. So yeah, going and traveling, it's like we also just see different things, like how people consume coffee. Like in China, it's like coffee's kind of new, and they're brewing coffee way different than we would brew normally here. And it's super interesting to see that kind of dynamic. Or they have cafes there that only do signature drinks. So they're only making these like weird, crazy concoctions, and they're lined up, 100 people deep, because the experience in that hospitality is so unique, while layering in like they're using recipes from the World Barista Championship. So it's like this cool. So yeah, it helped a lot. It's also helped like Cole and I now through coaching, we're doing a lot more. We're not just coaching one competitor now. Like last year we coached 4. And we coached another guy that ended up winning the World Barista Championship, so Mikkel Jansen. And so we've had 2 back-to-back, so it's been great. And we'll see where the coaching this year. We're supposed to be off to Japan in September to provide some support, and maybe to the US. We'll see. It's a very kind of weird niche thing that we love.
Awesome. You fell into it more or less.
Yeah, we had no choice.
You're 17 years in now.
Yep.
Sometimes people kind of look at a business that's lasted that long or that sort of thing, and they're like, oh, it's smooth sailing. It's all green on that side. Is that the truth? And if not, what kind of active things are you dealing with right now, and how are you dealing with them?
Yeah, so now we're trying to look, like right now, it's like trying to look at our next stage of growth. We've been through COVID, we've been like trying to fix the back end. So like putting in systems in here, like in the roastery, fulfillment, our online web store, and trying to set ourselves up for the next stage of growth, while at the same time understanding like there's financial constraints on that. So up until 2021, when we bought this roaster, we had never taken any loans. Everything had been built off to, like cash flow, which sounds nice, but is grueling in the moment, because every dollar counts. It still counts today. So that like where we're going is like, okay, what's our next strategy for growth? as far as like smooth sailing, from like 50,000 square feet, 50,000.
Bird's eye view?
Yes,
Yeah.
bird's eye
Yeah.
view. It might look like smooth sailing, but no, it's like, especially at the beginning, it's like I made maybe not like wrong or bad decisions, but just like not optimal decisions. You know, I said it earlier, it's like I waited too long to like get out of the cafes. I worked in the cafes every day for like 7 years, where I should have been thinking like more into the future state. I was so focused on the here and now. And as a leader, I think you need to, it's like that's a tough transition, going from like the here and now to the future state and going like, where are we taking this company? And now that's where like my time is spent, is like, okay, where do we want to take Rosso? And then what are all the actions to occur to get us there? So, you know, we're formulating that right now to, you know, I'm calling it Rosso, you know, 2025, 2026, but it's like, where are we taking the company? And how can we make the sailing much smoother than like in the past, where growth is like, it's tough. It's like systems break all the time, and especially when you're growing a lot. We went from 3 cafes to 7 we added 4 cafes in 16 months. That breaks everything. Like every system we had on our back end like was breaking down, like not fulfilling orders, not roasting enough, not sending the right order. And it was because the system in place was just very lax, because before we built anything, it was like, I would just tell you and you would just tell me, because we were the only 2 people working back there. But then there became a team, and yeah, putting in the systems is like the game changer. And you want to do that before the system breaks. You see it like, oh, it's about to break. Okay, build the new system for the next, like, whatever you want to say, 2x growth, 10x growth, 100x growth. Put that system in place so it can support the growth, and that'll smooth out as much as humanly possible, like the growth and those like tough times.
When those systems break and there are problems, or you're having to deal with something that was challenging, or, you know, just something goes wrong, how does that affect you personally, and how do you deal with that? Obviously, there's you know, as entrepreneurs, we have a face at work, and then but we still have to deal with that personally as well.
Yeah, that's tough. I think you know, I used to go in and like read all like the Google reviews and Yelp reviews, and then I was like, this is like not good for my mental health. Like I can't do this. So I think as like leaders in the company, regardless of any decision that happens in the company, it like falls on your shoulders. So if there's like a bad review at one of the stores, it's like, okay, what are we not doing to support this person that had this interaction with the customer that they felt this way? Or did we not provide enough training? Did we, you know, not have, I don't know, the coffee hot enough? Can we analyze something there? Is the system on like handing out drinks a little bit broken because on Saturdays it gets super busy there? Should we do a number system versus a name system versus just a description? So I try to own that without burying myself in the burden of like, how do I action on those things? So, you know, we have a leadership team, and it's like now it's like, oh, this thing's happening. That's in your area of the business. Can you go action to support whatever problem's happening? Has been like a big unlock for me. Unfortunately, I'm kind of like, let's say I can see things in a negative outlook, and it's really important for me personally to try to reframe as much as possible to a positive outlook, because you can read those reviews, and you can, like, the human mind sticks to the negative ones. At least that's where my mind goes. It's like, I don't remember when it's a 5 out of 5. I remember when it's a 1 out of 5. And I think also as an entrepreneur, you have to like take a risk. It's tough, but you have to put yourself out there. And part of that risk is like, someone might not like the product you're making, or your YouTube video, or the advice you're giving. They might not agree with it. So you gotta be able to handle that risk, and just know, like, whatever comes your way, you got to be able to like physically, mentally able to handle it.
I think that's where that constant improvement mentality comes in, though, right? Like being able to, not let it consume you, but take that feedback and improve on that 1 star, right? Where do you personally get fulfillment out of what you do now?
I think there's 2 big ones. Seeing team members grow within the company. We've got a couple, you met Paul earlier. I think he's one of the best roasters in the world. I think he's the best roaster in the world, but one of the best roasters in the world. And he's been, with the company almost 10 years. And to see him grow as a coffee professional, as a person, that type of growth, I can think of Danielle. There's like a bunch of people that have been in the company a long time, and seeing them professionally grow is very rewarding. Seeing them grow within the company. She started, as a part-time barista, worked as store manager. She did accounting. Now she's like in order fulfillment. It's like that. Those stories to me are really fulfilling. And then on the business side, it's like I get great joy of like when a system breaks, how do we fix it? And then at the same time, like, okay, how do we level up what we're doing and ratcheting up to the next level? So we've been fixing the back end, and it's like, okay, we're almost done that. Now let's go grow. Mm-hmm. Let's like push the growth.
Go break something else.
Yeah, like then it's like, okay, we can rebuild this thing. Like, how can we have it so we're roasting so much that this 45 kilo roaster is now a 70 or a 90 or 120? So how do we support that growth? That isn't a far off dream. Because I remember when we first moved in here, it was like April 2020. The world did shut down. There was nothing in here, and I was like, oh my God, I just signed this massive lease, and our cafes are down 80%. And our cafes up to that point was 80% of our revenue. So we're like, our revenue's down, gigantic percentage. Like, what are we gonna do? And I thought to myself, we had this a bit of coffee in here, nothing else. And I was like, we're never gonna fill this place. And now it's like jammed to the rafters. And that's all thanks to like, our team. Like, we got 65 people working at the company, and every one of them has contributed to like the growth. Everyone now has contributed to that growth, but also everyone over the course of the year. It's like 500 plus employees have been through the doors, and seeing them grow as individuals or going on to doing new things, and helping the company like get to new heights is, yeah, that part is like a big fulfillment and keeps us going hopefully for the next 20 years.
I love it. Looking back, like 17 years ago, do you think you could have foreseen kind of where you are now, and then in the same position, looking forward 17 years, do you have the foresight to see what that might look like?
I think a little bit easier going now forward, but if you ask me, back when I was 24 years old, where would Rosso be? I would have said like, my answer would have been like 100 cafes. 100 cafes, and like, no, I would have never gotten into, like, I never even thought at that time to get into roasting or sourcing coffee. Like, we've been to, so many countries. I should, write them all down, but we've probably been to 30 different countries thanks to like coffee. Like, that's an amazing part of like our job, that we have this honor of like going and traveling all the time because of coffee. And I would have never guessed that. I would have never guessed that, you told me in like 2009 that we'd help win the World Barista Championship. That was like, then in 2009, that was such a dream. It would just never seem like reality. And we've done it like 2 years in a row. That's like, or we have this like massive roaster. We're sitting on a podcast. Like, no way. I would just not believe, would have believed you if or myself if I went back in time. It would have been, just I had a totally different picture. And I think going into the future, transforming, hopefully in the next 5 years here, we're gonna see like cafe culture has gotta kind of transform, and there's some pressures on what's like feasible to do in a cafe. And I think we're gonna see like, we gotta blend in more technology. And not like, a bit of AI kind of stuff, but like more technology's got to go in to support that you can go into a cafe and it's like 2 baristas are working and they're more like sommeliers taking you through like the whole menu, while at the same time like speed of service is just as equally as high or faster than it is now. So we're trying to like look at that and being able to tailor the experience to you. So if you're really focused on the coffee, how can we know that almost before you get in the cafe or into ordering, versus I just want a coffee and out the door, and being able to tailor that experience a bit more. So we're like cooking up some stuff that try to like support that vision. It might take a bit of time.
Fair. Are there cafes that are doing that really well, like implementing that new tech and that sort of thing?
A bit, but the tech's gone more into, and I think we're gonna grab some of this, but the tech's more like, you're seeing it a lot in Australia. It's like they don't steam milk anymore. There's a machine that's like dosing out pre-steamed milk, and then they're grabbing the espresso and like pouring the drink and handing it out. So that kind of helps support. You're seeing kind of like the robot cafes, but I don't think like coffee needs the human to human interaction. That's like one of the most important parts. Like I'll never forget, it was a long time ago, but a customer came in and he said, I greeted him. I'm like, how you doing? He's like, you know what, man, I'm not doing well. I just need to get out of the house and talk to someone. And it just dawned on me like, holy shit, like this guy, he's struggling here. He came to the local cafe. He wants to just connect with someone. And he got his, he ordered a mocha. And I said, no, man, it's all good. I'll make the mocha. Let's just hang out for 5 minutes. And he drank his coffee and he left, all things considering, left the cafe feeling in a better mood than when he came in. And it's like, I think that's the power of like coffee, the cafe space. And it's not going to happen every interaction, but there is almost nothing better in the world than you get like a hot, or I shouldn't say hot, get a perfectly crafted coffee and take that first sip, and it just like washes over your palate, and it can be so inviting, warm, and it just like can set you in the right mood for like the beginning of the day, the end of the day, whenever you get it, and how can we like take those moments and not just have them in Calgary. Like for our goal is like, okay, how do we create those moments in other places?
Crafting that experience from front to back.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. What's next for you?
Oh man, what is next? Here for 2 more months, and then we have some training. We're in Japan. We'll be there for a couple of weeks, and then we'll probably be on the road a little bit doing like coaching, consulting throughout Asia. So we'll probably go to Indonesia, Thailand, do a few like shows there. And then in the new year, hopefully settled for a bit, but yeah, we got some projects. I don't want to say what they are, but we got some projects in the works that hopefully by Q1, Q2 of next year will be like super exciting, and maybe give a release to you somehow.
We'll stay tuned. Where can we send people to follow along?
They can follow on RossoCoffeeRoasters.com. You can find us on Instagram, same thing. You can find me on Crosby and Coffee on Instagram. And if anyone's got questions, just like reach out. Silly ones about coffee or entrepreneurship. It's, we're just here. Like, I think entrepreneurs, like, they want to support each other, and we all want to like help. And if there's someone thinking about starting a coffee business, like, reach out, or any type of business. We all have, lots of advice that we can give, better or worse, and just here for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dave. Your insights on entrepreneurship and personal life and the lack of balance or the balance therein has been incredible. So thank you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.